Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are embarking on a truly epic investigation into the profound spiritual, biological, and cosmic truths hidden right there in the Genesis narrative. I mean, we're going way beyond the standard Sunday school lessons today, you guys. We're looking at ancient texts, we're examining the precise language used to describe the very first days of humanity, and we're uncovering a massive story of a cosmological war, biological entropy, and the ultimate architecture of human freedom. So get ready, because what happened in Eden fundamentally altered the entire planet Earth and literally everything on it. To really understand the events in Eden, we have to start with the most fundamental question of existence. Seriously, think about this. What is love without the freedom to disobey? You know, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is so often framed as this tricky trap set for early humanity. But the source text we're analyzing today argues the exact opposite. Without a genuine alternative, love is merely captivity. God didn't want to create servants of stone or just mindless beasts of burden. He created beings in his own image, and that absolutely requires the capacity for genuine, freely given trust. Which brings us to part one, the architecture of free will. God deeply desired children who would actively choose him rather than creatures who literally had no other option. And this brilliantly illustrates that point. The tree was not a trap, it was a gift, the gift of genuine choice. God gave Adam and Eve everything in that perfect garden. I mean, every fruit, every pleasure was freely theirs to enjoy. He withheld only one single thing. And he did this to protect them because he fully knew the catastrophic cost that knowledge would bring. The tree represented that sacred boundary between creature and creator. It was the ultimate testing ground where trust either stands or falls. Let's look at part two, anatomy of the first deception. So the serpent wasn't just a random talking snake. As Ezekiel 28 points out, this was Lucifer, the anointed covering cherub. He was once the most magnificent of all created beings. And get this, he actually had standing in Eden. His presence there wasn't some sudden, shocking intrusion. It was a corruption of something that had once been incredibly beautiful. According to ancient writings like the Book of Enoch, Satan didn't just disguise himself. He actually used the serpent, which was a subtle, entirely familiar creature of the garden, as his physical instrument. He did this to exploit human vulnerability without ever triggering their alarm bells. Now, what's really interesting about this contrast is the profound difference between Eve's deception and Adam's choice. See, Eve was genuinely deceived. She was evaluating the serpent's words with a mind that had literally never once been lied to. She possessed absolutely no instinct for detecting falsehood because falsehood had never even touched her world before. But Adam, well, Adam was standing right there. He heard the serpent, he watched his wife, and he was not deceived. Adam made a deliberate, silent, and fully conscious choice to rebel. This distinction is absolutely critical, and it's captured perfectly here in 1 Timothy. Because Adam was given the direct command from God before Eve was even created, the true weight of original sin fell squarely upon his shoulders. He had the authority. He had the direct, crystal clear instruction. And yet, he stood silently by while the adversary corrupted his wife, and then he willingly followed her into transgression. Adam was not deceived. Moving right along to part three, the cosmos and biology altered. Look at how every single punishment was actually a precise, mirroring reversal of an original blessing. Joyful, painless childbirth, which was meant to be a gloriously natural process, was corrupted into agonizing travail. The equal, harmonious partnership, known beautifully in Hebrew as ezer kenegdo, was fractured into a painful hierarchy. The effortless abundance of the garden was replaced by grinding, sweating labor against a cursed ground that now fought back with thorns. And luminous immortality, instantly replaced by cellular decay. We can actually break the exact mechanics of this curse down into 5 distinct steps. First up, spiritual death. That unhindered, perfect flow of life-giving presence was severed. Second, corrupted consciousness. Their pure minds were infected with the experiential knowledge of evil. Third, cellular entropy. Their bodies immediately began the slow process of aging. Fourth, the glory departed. They suddenly, shockingly realized they were naked. And fifth, the planar creation broken. That harmonious dominion they had over the earth completely gave way to conflict, fear, and a groaning natural world. So, the crucial point is this biological shift. The source material describes this as the onset of cellular senescence. Before the fall, their bodies operated with perfect cellular replication, completely sustained by the tree of life. But once they were cut off from that sustaining presence, their biology experienced total entropy. They began accumulating copying errors in their DNA. their telomeres began to break down, and their bodies commenced a long, slow, inevitable journey back to the dust of the earth. Physiologically, ancient traditions suggest something truly wild. Adam and Eve were originally clothed in a literal garment of light, a radiant, visible glory. When sin entered the picture, that luminous covering was completely withdrawn. They were left merely physical, merely flesh. And this sudden, terrifying vulnerability forced God to make the very first blood sacrifice in history, slaying animals to make coats of skins to cover their nakedness. It's an incredibly powerful foreshadowing of the ultimate sacrifice that was to come.
All right, part 4, War of the Two Bloodlines. God declared this war immediately in Genesis 3:15, in a verse known as the Proto-Evangelium, or the First Gospel. He declared a perpetual enmity, a continuous, all-out battle between the seed of the woman, which points directly to the ultimate Redeemer, and the seed of the serpent. This initiated a very literal and spiritual battle between two completely distinct lineages that would define the rest of human history.
If we trace Satan's relentless strategy across the timeline, we see constant, desperate attempts to corrupt human DNA just to prevent that promised Redeemer from arriving. It starts right there in the garden with Cain's corrupted line. Then, as detailed in texts like the Book of Enoch, it moves to the pre-flood era with the Watchers and the Nephilim. Post-flood, we see the giants of Canaan, like Goliath's lineage, and it all culminates, ultimately, at the end of days, with the Antichrist. When we contrast these early lineages side by side, the division is honestly stark. The line of Cain built cities, developed metalworking, and organized humanity around this ruthless self-sufficiency and rebellion, completely ignoring their creator. On the flip side, the line of Seth remained spiritually uncorrupted. They quietly preserved the knowledge of God and began to call upon his name. There is an ancient and honestly super intense debate surrounding Cain's true parentage. Listen closely to the specific phrasing in this verse from 1 John. Not as Cain, who was of that wicked one. Notice it doesn't say he just imitated the wicked one, but that he was of him. Furthermore, Cain is entirely excluded from Adam's genealogies in Genesis 5. Because of this, ancient rabbinical writings and texts like the Book of Jubilees suggest Cain was the literal, biological manifestation of the serpent's seed.
Which brings us to our final section, part 5, Exile and the Promise of Planar Restoration.
Let's see how this builds a truly heartbreaking reality. Expelled from Eden, forced out into Mesopotamia, Adam and Eve had to learn entirely new survival skills. Ancient texts even suggest angels had to come down and teach them basic agriculture. Adam lived for 930 years. I mean, just imagine that for a second. Living for 9 centuries just outside the guarded gates of Eden, experiencing the agonizingly slow cellular decay of a body originally meant for immortality, watching death eventually claim your children, and having to pass the visceral, lingering memory of paradise down to your son Seth. But you know, the story absolutely doesn't end in exile. Remember that term, ezer kenegdo, that equal complement and beautiful, harmonious partnership? Well, the ultimate promise of this whole narrative is that the coming Redeemer doesn't just forgive sins, he comes to fully reverse the curse. The entire goal is the total restoration of perfect equality, perfect health, and perfect harmony that was fractured back in the garden. Everything that was lost the moment that fruit was eaten, the biological immortality, the perfect harmonious dominion over the animals, and that luminous, radiant presence of God, it is all promised to be fully restored. This epic narrative assures us that this story, which began in a perfect garden on a perfectly ordered planar earth, will ultimately end in one. The book of Revelation brings this whole epic full circle with this promise, and there shall be no more curse. It's the ultimate triumph over the serpent. It is the complete, total, irreversible defeat of cellular entropy, of the pain of childbirth, of the cursed ground, and of death itself. Which leaves us with this final, really provocative thought to consider. We've explored the architecture of free will, the tragic biology of the fall, and this unbroken war spanning all of human history. If everything lost in Eden is promised to be completely restored, where do you stand in this ancient cosmic war of the two bloodlines? The choice that began in the garden continues to echo today. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and keep diving deep into the text.